Unitarian Universalism affirms and promotes 7 principles, and we often hear one of those principles as our chalice lighting as we begin our assembly each week. We are also formed and informed by 5 sources, and our documents say it like this: the living tradition we share draws from many sources, including Jewish and Christian teachings, which call us to respond to God's love by loving our neighbors as ourselves. Understanding that some of us are triggered by God language, we congregational humanists are challenged to find innovative and useful ways to engage those Christian and Jewish teachings. Like people who identify as Christian, as UU, as Islamic, as Hindu, Jewish people have a spectrum of beliefs regarding the meaning of the holy, the divine. I follow the organization, the Society for Humanistic Judaism, which celebrates Jewish life while foregoing appeals to divine intervention. Instead, putting faith in human reason and human power as the best vehicles to improve the world. Sounds pretty familiar to our brand of congregational humanism, doesn't it? In my family, my husband is culturally, but not religiously, Jewish, and I have found myself drawn to the history, the stories, the ethical values of Judaism. So today, as we discuss Yom Kippur and what we UU humanists may learn from it, let's do so with an openness of mind that lets us not get stuck on the God or religion part, and that allows us to learn what we can from millennia of people practicing what it means to be in human community together. You may know that the Jewish community, some 14 million people worldwide, is in the midst of the High Holy Days, beginning with Rosh Hashanah, the New Year, and culminating in Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement. These 10 days of awe are a time of seeking reconciliation with those whom one may have wronged, making peace with individuals and community, remembering those who have died in the last year, and attuning oneself to humility and a more spiritual life. Yom, day, Kippur, atonement, which begins this evening, is considered the holiest day in the Jewish calendar, the culmination of the introspection begun at Rosh Hashanah. I find it compelling, this spiritual practice, to set aside certain days of the year to reach into this deeply personal work, as the rest of one's community is doing so as well. And I wonder, what would that be like? The English word atone is actually 2 words, at one. To atone is to be at one, in harmony with those I have wronged. When I humble myself in order to make it right, I try to be at one with the other person. Now, in the sense of religious naturalism, as I am a part of nature, I am at one with all of nature. All the universe is woven of one fabric of star stuff. When I act in such ways as to be out of balance with nature, my own, or the nature of healthy relationship, there is an absence of harmony, there's discord. It is for me, it is for each of us to do the spiritual, personal work to make it right. At its core, social justice work is atonement, to be at one with those who are oppressed, with the marginalized, and to bring the marginalized into the center. With whom are we seeking to be at one? Aren't we all one human family? Well, Well, yes, this is so. And while we each have inherent worth and dignity, we are not all treated as such, nor do we all act as such. Certainly, we know that in our human family, especially in this country, our democratic laws are not equally or fairly applied. This week, 65 years to the day after the killers of Emmett Till were acquitted, we learned that the killers of Breonna Taylor will not be charged with her murder. With whom can we be reconciled? With law enforcement or with communities of color who bear the brunt of racist policing? Is it an either-or question? Why not both? With whom will we be reconciled? With those who are afraid for their homes and neighborhoods as racial unrest erupts on our streets? Or with people who have had more than enough of oppression and unfairness and shout, "No more"? Is it an either-or question? With whom will we be reconciled? With those who say the climate crisis is a hoax, that this pandemic that has killed over 200,000 Americans is a hoax, that the results of science are not to be trusted? Or with people who live with the results of catastrophes in the midst of crises, who experience homelessness driven by COVID and blows to our economy, who live with poor air quality, who live and die without health care? Is this an either-or question? This is a deeply spiritual dilemma, and I don't know how to solve it. I do know that this year, with these dichotomies that seem impossible to resolve, to bring into harmony, or to be in at one-ment, these have been the biggest tests of my spiritual commitment, my Unitarian Universalism, my humanism of my life. In my conversations with you, I know that it is true for you as well. So many of you that I've spoken to have named an existential and deeply personal crisis. The only way that I know to be present with tests, with this crisis, is to be present to my own spiritual practices. And you tell me about yours, even if that's not what you call them. They can include talking to others about what's troubling us, talking to others about our joy, attending to the breath, turning off the news, engaging in specific justice activities, making art or music, walking or biking or gardening, cooking, reading, attending to the relationships with people we love, attending to the deep work of justice. Spiritual practices return us to ourselves so that we can do that deep work, so that we can be in right relation. The work of justice is the work of love. And this day of atonement calls us, no matter what divides us, to begin again in love. I want to lift up two beacons of justice that now live in our memories. You know, of course, about the death of Ruth Bader Ginsburg last Friday evening. The operatic pieces we are hearing today from our music director, Barb Brooks, and our gifted guest singer, baritone Mark Billy, are a tribute to Justice Ginsburg's love of opera. Thank you, Barb and Mark. These are the words of Karen Maratz, the executive director of Jewish Community Action, speaking last Sunday evening at the vigil for Justice Ginsburg. She died on Erev Rosh Hashanah, just before the new year. She did not join us as we stepped into the year 5781. That's significant. One of our community's beliefs is that only very righteous people die at the very end of the year, because they were needed until the very end. A Jewish colleague wrote on Friday night that I am telling myself RBG felt able to transition on this Rosh Hashanah because of her faith in us. We needed her for every moment of 5780. She believed in us to carry on her work into 5781. Maratz continues, a final thought. When a Jew dies, we say, may their memory be a blessing. It means that when you think of the person who has passed on, you remember them. When you remember them, may the memory bless you. It's a forward-looking sentiment. It's optimistic and hopeful. We are willing the memories of our loved ones to inspire us and to drive us to carry on their legacies of goodness and justice in the world. The legacy of Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg demands nothing less than that her memory should drive us to carry on her fight and to fight for justice for all people. Close quote. The world lost another beacon of justice this week, one with whom you may be less familiar, but whose loss is felt particularly keenly in Unitarian Universalism. Elandria, also known as E. Williams, was a young community activist and change agent who was the former co-moderator of the Unitarian Universalist Association. Williams was the co-founder of the Knoxville, Tennessee Black Lives Matter movement and an organizer of the renowned Highlander Center. E. wrote this about a project called Beautiful Solutions. Resistance is essential, but it's not enough. As we fight the injustice around us, we also have to imagine and create the world we want. We have to build real alternatives in the here and now, alternatives that are not only living proof that things can be done differently, but that actively challenge and eventually supplant the power of the status quo. This is atonement. To build a world in which we can be in harmony, so that the deaths of those who are great, like Justice Ginsburg, and the deaths of those who are famous only because of their death, like Breonna Taylor, are equal in our recognition of their humanity. Let us begin again, each day in love, a fierce, unwavering love for justice, for fairness, for the law equally applied, for our planet, for our country, for our democracy, for each other, for ourselves. May our love be for a blessing and for a revolution.